Hello, I thought I'd carry on from the last video talking about the use of water, and specifically one type of water, and that is the human vessel. Before I go any further, if you've got any young children, this is not really an appropriate video for them to hear. Use your discernment. You may want to hear this first and then decide whether you think it's appropriate for them to hear. So what we're going to look at is an example of how upside down and inverse this external reality is. And we can do that by looking at the old world churches. So as an example, we'll take your sort of classic old church built allegedly in the sort of 1300s onwards up to about 1900. Obviously you've got the Phoenix resets. If you compare with more modern religious churches and chapels, they don't have a lot of these features. Some of them even look, the more modern ones just look like industrial warehouses in their construction, very temporary, certainly wouldn't last as long as the older structures. Like I've said before on previous videos, everything in this external reality is based on human physiology. But first off, let's look at the word church. Where does it come from? It comes from the Scottish word kirk, which, if you trace it back, it'll come back to a mythological goddess who would lure people into a building, lock the doors and corrupt their minds. In other words, a Sunday service in Christianity. This is where we now start getting into the more graphic part of this video. Male masturbation. Now if you look at one of these old world churches, you'll see they have a tower and it is pretty obvious where the bell end is. Now obviously in masturbation, it's a stroking, but of course now we're sort of in a world where this old world structures are being corrupted and used in a different way for a very different purpose. That stroking is now the tugging on the cords of the bell ringers. The congregation, and it is a big con, unlike with masturbation where sperm is formed within inside, the bell is a sign to bring the sort of congregation, the masturbation for the ceremony of the Mass, for example. And of course, note the shape of the doorway that you will enter one of these church buildings. It is a representation of the female genitalia, basically the vagina. That's why they're always sort of arch-topped entrances. And then of course you've got the male aspect with the tower, the phallus with a bell at the top, and various either spires. Some of them at one time would have had domes, some of them are very like castle-like fortifications. That was to do with energy, but of course now it's the bell ringing, the summoning. And of course you go in through the vagina, and then you'll find at that end of the church you then have a thing called a font for the sort of ritual sort of birth from water, with a baptism ceremony. And of course the word font has a double meaning. It is a type of script, and of course religion is actually giving you a very fake script. Notice on these old churches as well, look at the floor. You'll often find that they are checkerboard floors. I wonder why that would be. And then you have rows and rows and rows of pews. because it is a fish story and you've been brought in to what is the body of the church. Just look up at the ceiling and you'll find it resembles an upside down boat or a rib cage. That is why it is the body of the church. This then leads to from the body to the sort of head section. Now you've got an inverted well. That is the pulpit. And if you look carefully at those, you'll find they are sort of almost a spiral of steps. As far as I can remember, they're always anti-clockwise. It's actually not, you're not going up into the pulpit, it's pulling you down into a well for the mind, where they will give these sermons and preach only specific approved passages from the Bible. They won't read you all of them. They're all government approved. Just look at any church and you'll find that they are registered. You'll often find on the doors, considering God is the only law, that you'll have signs, certainly in the UK, saying no smoking in this building, which is hardly a rule of a law of God. That's a government rule. So then you go up the 3 steps beyond the pulpit, and then you'll invariably find there is an organ with many windpipes. Again, the inverse of the human physiology, where you have one windpipe and several organs. And of course then that leads to the altar, where the mind is being altered. Hence the Circe's church reference. And then of course you've got the door off to one side that is not that visible, which is the sort of area for the priest and choir boys to get changed. We won't go into any further into that. In some of the older churches you will also find there are partition sections called rood screens. I leave that to you to imagine what may well have happened behind those rood screens at one time in their sort of altar boys. I think you get the picture. And of course, as another part of the ritual, sitting in those pews, you've got the stand up, kneel down, sit, stand, kneel, sort of ritual play out. And these church buildings, they're always commissioned and decommissioned. Now there's 2 interpretations of the decommissioning, because it is a commission, the way they're being used. But there's probably, with some of them, they are still collecting natural energy, and it's being funneled below that tiled floor to whatever is down there still. They tell you that there are crypts and things in some of these churches, and but what really goes on below that ground level is open to speculation. I suspect and feel that there is something that still goes on in some of these buildings, but obviously a lot of them, from the energetic point of view, have been decommissioned. But there is a sort of remnant of that, where there is this silver plate that is passed round, the collection plate. It is a ritual play out of harvesting energy, but it is harvesting your financial energy, wanting you to give money to this false god, where you're sort of looking up at her and singing and whatever, and bowing to a sort of window or an effigy. What does it say in the Bible about false idols and graven images? But a lot of these churches obviously have them. Another example of this inverse and the way they've been used, you'll often find, they say they've been extended, so you'll have these archways in the nave, and then there's sections to the left and the right which are called aisles, which are basically referencing to the 2 eyes, and then you have that middle path that would lead to the altar. But of course it has all been corrupted, inverted, and turned into something to get you to put blind faith. But if you actually read the Bible, and I do mean read it, and stop reading it as a literal historical story and see it as a spiritual story that has been rewritten and overwritten by a certain group to serve an agenda, because it is all about putting something between you and the Creator, which is within inside you. Just look up at the or look up pictures of the picture of the Sistine Chapel, the Michelangelo painting, and you've got this Adam, which is the atom, the physical man, and he's sort of laid back, he's got his hand out. Within what is basically the pineal gland is this anthropomorphized picture of God with an outstretched hand, but look carefully at those two hands of this Adam atom and this metaphysical creator. And you'll see that the fingers do not touch. That is just a way of telling you that there is nothing between you and God. It is something within inside you. But it is all about raising that Christ consciousness within inside yourself. And of course, your physical body, your embodiment, needs to be fertile soil, not blind belief in such things. So just a sort of reiteration of a video from quite a long time ago, with a little bit more, just to give a sort of perspective on and a perfect example of how things have been externalized, just like the Bible has been turned into an external story. Yes, it is used as a script. Yes, it has been played out many times, and there are historical events that are done to fit the script, or at various times they are rewritten so these things conform. It's a bit like another sort of branch of this same sort of monster, shall we call it, science, where you have a theory and you get the facts to fit the theory, or you call it an anomaly. With religion, it's the same thing basically. You sort of fit the facts around the script. So just a few sort of things to sort of consider next time you see one of these old world buildings, these old world churches. I mean, if you really think that they were built by monks who had a sort of gift or skill in stonemasonry, and just think of the huge cathedrals. I mean, the word cathedral comes from cathode, which is cold fusion. And that's basically what you're getting, cold fusion, confusion, being sold a fish story which has been externalized to corrupt people's minds. That's why, back to Circe's again. It is all basically a mind corruption and a way of getting you to give away your power instead of finding it within inside yourself. I mean, it tells you in the Bible, I can't remember where it is, but it says the temple of God is not made by human hands. It's talking about the temples are on the side of your head. It's within. That is your heavens. It's nothing to do with the external world. But some will be in, oh, shock horror and believe in Jesus and all this nonsense. But what you're really looking for, and it's always the last place you think to look, and it would seem unbelievable that you are actually a personified aspect of the Creator. It tells you right in the beginning, the Word was made flesh. It's a living God. So where would God reside, if you want to call it that? But in each and every one of us. But it is dormant until you can reactivate it and awaken the dreamer that is inside you. It is your human imagination. And it does solidify the thoughts from the imagination, solidify in the mind, which then starts this magical process and it becomes externalized. See, this corruption and this hijack in this upside down world follows exactly the same pattern, where they will take an idea and then externalize it in a material form, and it is very material after all. It's the sole purpose of it is to capture your soul and your spiritual energy, and of course symbolically that collection plate that comes round. So I'll leave that there, and hopefully that has given you a new insight as to what these church machines are currently being used for, not what they were originally used for, which, as I said in the last video, probably in conjunction with the star forts, a way of re-energizing water, because they're always, you'll find these churches, cathedrals and things are always near water. It may be a river, it may be an underground river these days, but they're always there. And hence the font and the whole idea of the baptism, the upside down well with the pulpit, they're all referencing this. And of course the whole Christianized bastardization of a spiritual story is all about fisher of men and fishermen, so you've got plenty of water references in that alone. So I think we'll leave that there, and love to you all, and just have a look at these things and weigh up how they're being used now and consider what they were originally for. It comes back to, if you had a vapor canopy where the waters were above and they were not getting contaminants from soil and rock and stone, after the world has changed, you've then got to filter that water and then clean it. But of course even that has been corrupted, and water companies are obviously part of the system, hence all the fluoride and all that and everything, and recycling of water. But the original purpose of those buildings, I feel, is to do with post-flood, post-collapse of that vapor canopy, and you've now got to filter that water. It then needs to be re-energized. It is also to do with collection of the electric in the ether, hence the spires, the phallus part of the church. It's all to do with energy collection. Most of them have had the technological side removed, although you will find earthing straps, which they tell us are to do with lightning in case the building gets struck, but I would dispute that, and I feel there is another reason, and there is something else more sinister going on even today with these church machines, beyond the superficial religious BS belief systems, of course. So love to you all, and till the next video.